Okay, good morning, everyone. Thanks for taking the time today to hop onto our webinar. My name's Adam, and I'll be going over the quick check feature today. Just as we get started, though, I'll point out that you should have in your controls an option to send a chat message, and maybe somebody can send a chat now just to confirm that you can hear me and you can see my screen. But if you have if you have that available to you, you can, oh, good, looks like I'm seeing some people saying they're hearing me, so that's good. Uh, and if you have questions throughout as we talk about the quick check feature, you can send a chat in, and if we can cover some of those, we will, and if not, we can follow up afterward with some of those other questions that maybe we didn't get to. But hopefully, as we go through this today, it will be pretty straightforward, and we'll answer a lot of your questions even along the way. So with no further ado, let's go ahead and hop in and just take a look at the quick check feature and what it means to you. So here I have a project open here on my screen. You can see I have a list, and if I was to expand some of these packs, you can see I've got quite a bit of information here. So kind of a whole house that we've done. And hit Control P and just view a report. And so we scroll down past the notes, and we've got a pretty full list. So main floor, upper floor, and so on. So the idea with the quick check feature is, as has been noted other places, to provide you an easy way to elevate the quality of your outputs, of your takeoffs that you do, without having to spend a ton of time double checking your work. So let's just talk about two things, what quick check will look for and what it won't look for. Quick check is going to use a set of rules and information in the data that you have entered into your material lists in project. Quick check is not a function that's going to evaluate your blueprints or evaluate the plan and read the plan for you and decide that, oh, you should have done this in this situation and should have done that in that situation. It's not going to double check your blueprint for you. Rather, what it's going to do is it's going to work off of a set of rules and provide information back to you about the material list that you've created that might be helpful to you to help you catch those sometimes obvious mistakes that you can make, the ones that you look back on and say, how did I miss that? So the concept is you work through your list, as I've just shown here that we've done, maybe add your notes in for your project, and then you can see we have the quick check tab here. The idea is to run the quick check tab in the information and analyze it before going on to creating your framing layouts and reports and ultimately outputting your job. So I'm going to go to the quick check tab for this project. And if you haven't seen it before, it's broken into two different parts. First is the general information side over here, and then the second would be the potential errors. Let's start by taking a look at the general information side. I'm going to come to this refresh button, and here is a good place to note that the quick check feature in the data that you see here is not live, in the sense that as you make changes throughout your list in your project, these fields are not going to update automatically. They require you to actually click the refresh button, in a sense, have it reevaluate your list and provide updated information. So I'm going to come to this general information side and click the refresh button. And as a result, we'll get a bunch of information that's provided. And that's essentially what it is. As we provide this information on the general information side, it isn't a statement about that there's necessarily something wrong. It's just gathering a bunch of information that might otherwise be difficult for you to find, or you would have to kind of painstakingly look through your list and find all this information. But instead, we've just gathered it into a central location, making it easy for you to see. So for example, we've got floor decking, and we've got about 3,000 square feet of it that's been called in this project. Our stud quantities are listed here, stud on center spacings, and so on. But just as an example of how we might use this feature, we're glancing down through the list, and we look at gable sheathing and notice, that's interesting. I've got two different types of gable sheathing. That probably is a mistake in this case, or at least I'm thinking for my project and the way that I do things. I've got most of it's 7/16, you can see, and part of it's 1/2 inch. So I could go over to my list and I can come down to my roof pack, scroll down to my gable sheathing, and here it is. So I've got 3 line items of different places I've called it out. A couple of them are the 7/16, but I've got this third one that's 1/2 inch. So obviously I must have made a mistake, and I said, oh, whoops, I should have been calling 7/16. So I can change that product, 7/16 OSB, so now it matches. And if I come back now to the Quick Check tab, and I'm going to refresh this data, and notice that that now collapses into a single line item. So that would be an example of how you might find the general information section interesting to you. Here's just another example, roof decking. We provide all the different types of roof decking as well as the square footage and the pitches at which they're used. And here I notice I've got a 0 pitch roof area, which strikes me again as that's a little bit odd. I must have not assigned that particular item. So it would be a flag to me of, hey, I need to go back and check some of my roof areas, make sure that I'm actually having them pitched in the way they should be. So, and then finally down here we've got the siding section, which shows you all the different square footages of siding, and then a total of those different types of siding up at the top. So that's the general information side. The second side would be what we would call the potential errors. And as I described earlier, what the software is doing is it's going off of a set of rules that has been set up in the background, and we'll look about how to adjust those rules a little bit later. But it's going off of a set of rules and evaluating your material list in your project in light of those rules. And if it finds that a rule passes or meets the standard, then it doesn't bring up a flag for you. It just lets it go on by and it's passed on through. But if the rule essentially fails, that check that's being run fails, then you will get an error that will show up here in the potential errors section. So we're going to use the refresh button for this side, and we'll click it. And for this project, we've got a few that have shown up here. Now, notice that this is broken into a few different sections. First is list and pack. And the list, so it's essentially what kind of rule is it? And we'll talk about the type of rule in the area, but the big thing to gather is the list type rules relate to a list as the whole, whereas a pack would relate to a very specific pack location. And you can see it's listed over here in the far right-hand column. So let's just take a simple example, the one right here at the top. Missed related application. So this first column indicates what type of error, what generally speaking has gone wrong here. So we've missed a related application. The details tell us we've called rafter, but no ceiling joists were called anywhere in the list. And so for my type of work, that's usually a flag for me. You know, 85, 90% of the time that I'm calling rafters, I'm calling ceiling joists because of where I'm doing my jobs. Maybe that's not true for you, but in my area, that would be true. And so I wanted to remind me that, hey, maybe you missed your ceiling joists here. Now, I happen to know on this job that those rafters were basically in kind of an overframing area. And so it's okay, I didn't really need ceiling joists in this case. And so what I have the option to do is to dismiss this rule for this particular project. To do that, I'm going to left click on the icon here, over there where the icon shows up, the warning symbol. I'm going to left click on it, and as a result, it's going to gray out. So it's not going to go away entirely. It's still going to stand there as a reminder to me that, hey, this rule didn't pass, but now it grays out, indicating that, okay, I looked at that, and in this case, it's all right. I've essentially let it go. Now I can come to this next one, missed related application. I called roof decking, but no roof shingles. And so perhaps for me, that is a warning that, oh yeah, that's right, I didn't call the roof shingles, I need to go and do that. And it's in the house list. So if I had multiple lists, like a house or detached garage and other buildings, I would know which list to go and address that issue at. If we come down to the packs, we can find here a couple different types, a different type of rule here. So let's read this one right here. Missed matched product. I called floor joist blocking 2x10 dug for number 2, but there's no floor joist with the same product. So that's a little bit odd that I would call a floor joist product or floor joist blocking product, but it doesn't match the same product type. Or I don't have a blocking material that matches the same depth. So this is happening in the house in the upper floor list. So I'm going to go over there. I'm going to come to my list. Here's my house list, and I'm going to come to my upper floor. And I'll find my floor joists. Okay, I've got 2x12s. And then I can scroll down a little bit further, and I've got floor joist blocking. But it's 2x10. Oh, and I also noticed that, hey, look, my rim is 2x10. And then maybe I remember at that point, oh, that's right, the customer called me back and he wanted me to change the floor joist from 2x10 to 2x12. And I did that for the floor joists, but I forgot to actually change it for the rim and the floor joist blocking. So easy enough to change. I can change that to 2x12, and I'll change that one to 2x12. And now I'm going to go back to my Quick Check tab. And I'm going to click the refresh button. And as I do, now because those rules are no longer failing, instead, since the blocking is matching everywhere and the rim is matching everywhere, those rules no longer show up on my list. I've fixed those issues. I haven't dismissed them like I did this one up here, where the problem still exists, but I've just set it aside. Instead, in this other case, I went back to the list, I resolved the issue, and now those rules no longer are a problem. So you get the general idea of how that works. And then finally, we'll come down to this plan section and show you that from the plan tab, the one thing that we will report to you are things that you have started on, where you started to draw something and you started to assign an application and even a product, but it didn't actually get linked to your list. So I can see this. I've got my stair stringers and stringer kick plate on page A5. So I can go over to my plan. I'll find page A5 and navigate there, and let's see, yes, in the takeoff items list, I've got these two items. The stringer kick plate, I've even signed a product to it, but I didn't send it to a pack. So again, bringing those things to your attention, you can decide if they're acceptable and you intentionally did that, or if it really is something that you need to actually get into your material list and not just an oversight. So that's the general look of how to use the Quick Check feature. But the next step, though, of course, with it is while we have set it up a particular way of giving you settings to start with, of course, all of you have a different way that you approach your business. You even have different types of things that you call. Maybe some of you are geared only toward floor joists, and you don't even do siding. And so some of these rules in here may not be what you want. So we have provided you the ability to have settings for these tools. So on the general information side, there's a few settings that you can control. I'm going to come to the little gear icon, and I'm going to look at my options. And essentially what I can control from the general information side is whether or not I want to view certain types of options. So for example, let's say that I don't do siding in my type of business. I can just choose to uncheck the siding section, and I'll click OK, and it's going to refresh for me after I click OK. And notice that siding no longer shows for me. So for the general information side, it's really just about not cluttering up your view of something. If you don't want to have to look through it or look past it all the time, then just condense it down and just pick the pieces of information that are going to be useful for you to view in your particular case. And then I'm going to come to the settings on the potential error side. Click the settings. So much in the same way, this box is a little bit bigger, but much in the same way as the general information side, you also have a set of checkboxes here next to what we would call all of the rules. So the rules are, rule name is in this center column, all these different types of evaluations that are being made on your list. And so if you find some that aren't what you want, then you could choose to turn them or just uncheck them. Basically, don't make them active anymore. So for example, if bearing plate being missed, if that isn't important to you, you could come to it and uncheck the box. And now that rule will no longer be run. It will no longer be checked against as you refresh your Quick Check tab. But it's still available for you to come back in and turn back on in some cases. Maybe you have a rule that it applies for half of your jobs but not the other half. So you could turn them on and off depending on what your project you're working on. But you also have the option over here, there's a little delete icon, a little trash can icon. You can choose to delete a rule altogether. So I'm going to choose that for the bearing plate. And it's just going to make me confirm. I'll click yes. And now that bearing plate rule actually has been deleted. It's not there anymore. So for some of you, you may find that a useful tool for you as you look at the different rules that we've populated for you as a starting place. But now you can customize it to what you want it to be. So if you have a bunch of rules in there or some rules in there that you don't find useful to your business, then you can just choose to delete them so they're not cluttering up your view and cluttering up the way that you want to use the project. Now, ultimately, you guys are going to have other ways that you want to use the tool, not just the ones that we've created. And so that's why we've created this rule creator inside of this rule manager where you can build your own rules. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to run through this 2 times about how to create a rule. It's actually pretty straightforward, but I would encourage you to do, if you're at your computer, is just watch me on this first one. I'm going to go through one rule creation and just watch me on the screen. And then the second time through, go ahead, if you're at a spot where you can do it, you can follow along with me as we build that second rule. And you can actually do some watch and do things here as we go through it. So to create your rule, to create something that's more unique to your business, it can have a little more control of it. You would open your rule manager. I'm going to close this just so that we are starting from the beginning. So I'd be in my potential errors section. I'm going to come to the settings. And in the settings window that pops up, I'm going to come to the rule creator. I'm going to click on that in the upper left-hand corner. And when I do, I get this box that pops up. And the rule creator is going to have basically 3 different steps, 3 different boxes that you have to go through. The first is the question of where do you want to test for an error? So this is basically a question of how broad do you want to run this rule? So for example, the project as a whole. Here's the example. Did I call headers somewhere in the entire project? So think of, for example, just for a minute of a large multiple building project where you have many lists, 3 or 4 lists even. Would you want to just check to see if you called headers somewhere in the project, like as long as it lands in one of my lists somewhere, then this rule is satisfied and you won't be flagged about it. That's what the project level means. Probably not many rules that you would want to implement at that level, but it is available for the times that you want to. Next is the individual list level. So the example is, did I call headers somewhere in each of my lists? So each list is evaluated separately to find out, did we call headers somewhere in the list? It might not be in all of the packs of the list, but it's at least in the list somewhere. And if any particular list failed to get that information or it failed to get a header, then you would get a warning about that particular list. And then finally, at the pack level, did I call headers in each of my packs? So this type of rule is going to be run at each and every pack in your entire project. Did I call a header in this specific pack? And any header that fails that rule, in this case, if I didn't call headers in that particular pack, then I would get a warning for that particular pack. So for this first rule, I'm going to start with this center item of, did I call headers somewhere in my list? So a list level rule. I'm going to click next. And now it's going to ask me, what kind of rule do I want to create? What is it that I'm wanting to check for? And you are given a list of different options that you can choose from. So the list says, a few of the options here, a specific type of application has been used at least once. So kind of like the one we were talking about there. Did I call headers? If one type of application is used, is a related application also used? And there's a few other ones here. We're going to pick this first one. A specific type of application has been used at least once. Now, we're given a common example just to give us a feel for what's being done here. So make sure that floor joists are being called. That might be a common way you would use this rule. We'll click next. And we're coming to this final screen. So this is the third and final screen of when you're building a rule. And you're reminded here at the top of what you're building. So the kind of rule is make sure that a specific type of application has been used at least once. And common examples reminded of. So then we come to the settings. So what is the application that we want to check for? Floor joist? Well, actually, what we want to check for is, let's say, a pocket door frame. Maybe you find that most of your projects, because of where you're coming from, maybe 60-70% of your projects require a pocket door frame, and it's just one of those things that it's easy to forget about, and you just didn't do it. And so you would like to have a reminder that says, hey, if you didn't call a pocket door frame, or you just double check to make sure that you didn't miss something there. So we're going to pick pocket door frame as the application. And then we're going to set the severity. Now, in this case, since it's not necessarily wrong every time if we missed a pocket door frame. Now, if we expected that pocket door frame to be in every project, we would probably want to set it as an error, that this is really wrong. But we might say that since it's not going to be definitely wrong, it's more just something that we want to be checking on, we'll set this as warning. So it's basically a reminder that, hey, something might be wrong here, but you need to check it out. So then down below, we have the resulting rule that's written out in plain English for us to read. So it says, okay, make sure that the pocket door frame application is used in every list. So that's the rule that essentially we're going to be creating as soon as we hit the create rule button. So we'll do that. We'll hit the create rule button. Since we created a list rule, this list is populated into that list section. And you can see it's right here, pocket door frame is missed. And we'll click done. And now, since the rules have been rerun, and since I didn't call the pocket door frame in this particular list, I immediately got a warning of, hey, you didn't call the pocket door frame. So there's the general flow of how you would create a rule. So if you're following along and you have a spot where you can do it, go ahead and why don't you do this second one with me. We're going to do one that's a little bit more involved, a little more, one or two extra settings. I'm going to come here to the settings again, and I'm going to choose the rule creator. And this time, we're going to pick one for the pack level. The pack level, so I'm going to select that. So this rule that we run is going to be applied or evaluated at each individual pack level. So we'll click next. And the pack level actually has the most flexibility of the number of types of rules that you can create. With the drop-down list, you can see there's many different types. A lot of them follow the concept of a specific type of application that's been used. Make sure it's been used once, or if you use one type of application, make sure that you have a related application. Like we saw earlier, where it's checking to see if you call rafters, make sure you've got ceiling joists. So a lot of similar things in that way. But I'm going to come down to this bottom one here that says, material from a specific category does not exceed a specific length. So I'm going to select this option. And I'm reminded of a common example of why I might want to do this. Make sure that no lumber material exceeds 30 feet in length. So that's like, okay, yeah, I want to make sure that if I'm shipping something in my material list that's over 30 feet in this case, or maybe for me it's 20 feet, that I don't, I want to know that if I'm going to have to be special ordering something in like that, because for me anything over 20 feet is a special order, I want to make sure it's actually absolutely required, and not just that I forgot to break rafters over a bearing point and I'm just shipping 30-foot rafters for no reason. So I'm going to click next. And now I'm given the option to specify the values or the specific items for that rule. So again, the kind of rule at the top is listed. Material from a specific category does not exceed a specified length. Okay, and here's a common example. Make sure that lumber does not exceed 30 feet. So here a category that's already picked for me is lumber, but this actually could apply to other ones. Say for example, EWP. Maybe for all of my truss joist products, I wanted to make sure that none of my TGI joists went over 40 feet. So I could pick that very specific category and say, make sure none of my joists go over 40 feet. Or I could just do EWP as a whole. I could say any engineered wood products that I'm calling, make sure they don't go over 44 feet or 48 feet or whatever you'd want it to be. In this case, we'll go back to lumber, and we'll set it to, and just for fun, let's just, instead of 20 feet, let's just say nothing over 16 feet, just to see how this works out. So again, we can set the severity. It could be whatever you want. So, in this case, maybe it's still just a warning because maybe it's right. It's more something just to check out. We'll set it as warning. And so now we've got this written out in plain English, again, for us of here's the resulting rule that we've got based on what we've set up here. The rule is going to be make sure that there's no usages in the lumber category longer than 16 feet in each of the packs. So we'll click Create Rule. And we'll come down here, and since it's a pack rule, it's going to be listed in this area. And here it is, lumber products don't exceed 16 feet. Category excessive length is the type of rule. So we've got it there. We'll click Done. And as soon as we click Done, the rules are going to be rerun or reevaluated. And as a result, wow, look at this. We've got a whole bunch of errors that show up because we're calling a bunch of lumber that's greater than 16 feet. Now, let's just say, yeah, that probably wasn't the right rule to create. So we want to edit that rule. So two options here as we finish up, and we're nearly done. But two options of how do you change a rule that is existing? How do I, like maybe you made a mistake or you just want to make some adjustments. So you have a couple different options. First, you can come back to the Settings tab. And one option is to come down to the pack and find, here's my rule, here's my lumber products don't exceed 16 feet rule. You do have the option to edit that rule. Now, the edit button isn't going to bring up that same rule creator as you had before. This time, you more have the opportunity to just edit some of the things about it. And some of those items may be a little more straightforward than others. And I'll open this to show you what I mean. Here's the edit window. So at the top is the name of the rule. So this is just going to show up here in the rule creator window. The type of error would be the what's going to show out there in the potential error section where we saw before. So it's kind of a short little statement about it. You could change this if you wanted to, but it's going to populate with something. Here's the equation. And this is basically the rule, the equation that's driving the rule. And if you know how to use it, or maybe talk to us a little bit more about how to use it, you can make edits and changes here. But there's some obvious ones. So for example, category excessive length. The specific settings for it obviously are lumber, since that's the category picked, and 16 obviously is the length. So let's say we wanted to change this and we wanted it to be 20 feet instead of 16. So I could come here and I could change this to 20. So I replace the 16 with a 20, and also the error message, I'm going to want to change it too, since it's right now it's going to tell me that it's greater than 16 feet, but I'll change it to greater than 20 feet. So I'll make that change. And so now I've adjusted it, and let's say I also want to change this to be an error at the error level. Click OK. And now we'll click Done, and again, those rules will get rerun for me again. And notice that in this case, now I've eliminated most of those errors, since now we're evaluating for things above 20 feet. And there's still one here that's wrong. And I would go look in the house porch pack to find out, hey, there is still something here. Is that really right? Maybe it is. Maybe it's just a porch beam that really legitimately needed to be that long. But at least I was warned about it in case it was a mistake on my part. So that's how that would work. So that's one option. And that's a little bit more advanced, if you will, especially if you're kind of getting into where that the editor, the category. Come back in here. Take a look at this one more time. We'll edit this. See in here, even I forgot to adjust the name of it so I wouldn't be confused later how I can change this to 20 feet. So that's a little bit more advanced method of doing it, and you can click OK. The other option, which may seem obvious to many of you, but if you created a rule and you just don't like the way it is and you really don't want to try to figure out how to edit it through this fashion, maybe it just doesn't make sense to you, of course you have the option to just delete that rule altogether get rid of it, and just go through those simple steps of the rule creator one more time and just adjust what you needed to. And since the rule creator is actually a pretty short operation to use once you're familiar with the process of those 3 short screens, it's actually pretty easy just to build a new rule again. So 2 paths for editing. One is really just to delete the old one and start over and make the new one, since it's a pretty straightforward process. Or if you're comfortable with it, even just go into the edit window and make the few changes that you want. Finally, as we finish up here, I want to point out that the rules that you create here, they are based on the specific project file. And this is an important concept to get, and actually you can leverage this in your business. So the settings that you're setting here, they're not user settings. They're not ones that are just going to automatically span across all of your different template files. So if you want your rules to be able, you want to set up your rules, you're going to want to do this in your base template file so that as you going forward, it will be available. Now the advantage of this being file-based or template file-based, project-based, is the fact that you can create different rules for different types of projects or different types of customers. Maybe you have a customer who never wants to see anything longer than a 20-footer or anything longer than a 16-footer on his job site. And so you create a rule specific to him for that. Or maybe you have another customer who has a different set of parameters that, you know, he always wants shingles called for his project, and he's the only customer that you actually call shingles for him every single time. So maybe you create a rule for his template that reminds you to call those shingles. So you can build the rules and change the rules depending on your specific customer or depending on the different type of job that you're working on. If you do some jobs that are floor-only jobs where you're just calling the floor cavity, then you might have a set of rules that is really geared toward that. Whereas if you have a different file that you use to start projects where you're calling the entire house, you might have a different set of rules that's for that one. So rules are project-based and therefore can be customized for the different templates and needs that you have in those. And I'll just pause here. I haven't seen any chats come through with particular questions. If you had one, you can send one in real quick here, but I think that's the bulk of what we wanted to cover today. I hope that was helpful in giving you a vision for how you can use the tool and especially how you can customize it to fit your particular business needs. And if you came in late and didn't quite hear all of it, we are having a recording of this, so just send an email to our support email box and we can send you a recording of this for you to review at a later time. So again, thanks for taking the time, and really hope that you will be able to hop into that quick check feature. I know it's a busy time of year, but I think it can really be a benefit to your quality of your estimating without costing you too much extra time in your day-to-day jobs. Hopefully you'll find that it's a useful tool. So thank you again, and enjoy your afternoon.